seek, above all, for a game worth playing. Oh baby, it's witchcraft contagious. I've felt it for ages. We're out of these cages in this house of mages. It's witchcraft, it's dangerous. Beware of these pages. There's spells of all flavors in this house of mages. In this house of mages. In this house of mages.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Make Yoga Magic Again, the House of Mages podcast. I'm Daniel Cumming. In this episode, I interview Dane Tomas. Now, when I create these little intros for my guests, I've been searching their name online to see if I can find a bio to start with. But Dane's bio seems to shift and change depending on what part of the internet I'm reading about him on, which does seem suitable for a Dragon of the Void. Dane Tomas is probably most famously known for creating the radical modality of self-transformation known as the Spiral, along with the school that teaches its methods and the book that explains the principles of the system, Clear Your Shit. He's also authored 4 other books on everything from sex wizardry to merging business and spirituality, and presented paradigm-shattering events, rituals, and trainings across the world. Recently, he's founded Dark Wizard Media and started releasing his unique style of hip-hop that blends deep, void-like beats with mischievous wordplay and storytelling. I first heard of Dane when a mutual friend sent me a link to a video of him freestyle rapping in the car about runes and magic. As someone who spent most of their life delving into hip-hop, runes and magic myself, I had to know who this guy was. When I found what Dane was creating and sharing with the world, it was a breath of fresh air to me, and I've been interested in his work ever since. Recently, he's been talking about magic a lot more, and he's been sharing his reconnection back to this craft. So now seems like as perfect a time as ever to chat with him about all these things. I will ask though, if anything in this episode might rub you the wrong way, I'd ask you to follow through to the end of it, as we do eventually explain and expand upon things we touch on early in the conversation. So bear with us and it'll all make sense. So, without further ado, here's my chat with dark wizard, ritualistic rapper, and esoteric entrepreneur, Dane Tomas. And we are live. So welcome everybody to this episode of the House of Mages podcast. I'm Daniel Cumming, and I've got a very special guest that I've been wanting to chat magic with for quite a while. So I have the dark wizard himself, Dane Tomas, with me today. So Thank you, brother.
Hey, bro. Hey, everybody.
So I first heard about you when Victoria sent me a message on Facebook, and all it said was, "This is my friend Dane. He's rapping about runes." And it was just like a video of you in your car just kicking freestyles about runes and magic and stuff. And yeah, I was like, oh, because I think like the kind of tantric community I knew from that kind of group, no one really was into like hip hop and no one really like rapped about runes and stuff like that. So yeah, I just started following your stuff after that.
Yeah.
And then, I read your books, had a look at some of the stuff you were doing and kind of been, following your journey over the last few years. And seeing you start to talk about magic a lot more, which is like awesome for me, because being someone who's delved pretty deeply into ceremonial magic over the last like 10 or so years, I don't really see that around the community, I guess, that we're both kind of a part of. It's usually like neo-shamanism, neo-tantric kind of stuff. So, bro, I'd love to start with, your journey and how you ended up getting introduced to magic, and if it's kind of been like a consistent thing or you've gone on a lot of different tangents.
Yeah, nice. So for me, the feeling right now, it's like I've been coming into the reclaiming of this probably only like 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years. But it feels like a reclaiming of something that I was into as a little kid, like I remember making runes when I was, I don't know, preteen, maybe 12 or 13. And cut them out of wood and stain them with a little drop of blood. And, you know, my mum made me a little velvet bag to keep them in. And like, you know, it wasn't like, so my family wasn't very, nothing was really taboo in my family around, I don't know, magic or things like that. And, you know, I guess there was always that connection to the idea of magic as a sort of primary school kid, and even young, you know, a big obsession with kind of fantasy and mythical fiction. I remember reading like Beowulf when I was a little kid, you know, like I don't know how somehow I got my hold of stuff sometimes that I'm like, how the fuck did that child get that book? You know, how was a 7-year-old reading like Norse sagas or whatever? But it just somehow, you know, I would go to the library a lot and I would just pull out whatever. And as I was obsessed with ghosts and, you know, like a really little kid, I was just obsessed with ghosts and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like the supernatural and the otherworldly was always there. And then, you know, it's like as I grow up, there's kind of an in and out of what I'm exposed to or what I'm wanting to own or be associated with. But I feel like it's always been with me, you know, and I think a lot of people probably feel like that. You know, there's always been some connection to. It's funny because the magic thing as well, I guess another thing that's happened for me is since my teens, I journeyed pretty extensively with a lot of different traditions, modalities, practice. You know, I'm like a professional dabbler, you know, like I guess I'm kind of maybe have a degree of mastery in a couple of things, but I'm much more commonly like, well, I did this for a year, then I did that for a year, then I investigated this. And then I went to the Theosophical Society when I was 19 and got into their stuff. But then I got weirded out by their stuff and I left and I got more into Buddhism and Eastern philosophy. And, you know, there's just been this dabbling and nibbling. And I have a comparative religion background from university, which I didn't know why I was doing that, but I was very drawn to it and it was awesome. And I kind of got into chaos magic somewhere around the path, maybe in my 20s, like little ebook downloadable things off bulletin boards that you can't, you know, you couldn't just buy it. You get some pirate hookup or whatever. And I've been consuming and nerding out on bits and pieces of magic. It seems like forever, but it definitely hasn't been at the forefront of what I've been doing my whole life for sure. And I think I ended up at Haydn Mystery School in 2018 after doing a lot of work with ISTA, International School of Temple Arts, and I started finding a community that was very into ritual. A lot more ritual was starting to happen in my life with groups, which I'd always done things privately, like sigil magic and little private things I'd always done, and something I would come back to periodically, intention setting, creating rituals or whatever. But when I kind of found that shamanic tantric community, I think one, I managed to get in spaces where there was a lot more ritual going on. So I just started to bathe in it more and kind of realized, I'm kind of actually have been doing this shit for years, but not with 20 or 30 or 40 people. And then also along that path, I had some real big ego deaths and sort of came back from those with like, well, I don't really give a fuck what people think about me, you know? Whereas I guess I didn't think that I cared what people thought, but on some level, in my 20s or whatever, when I was a rapper, and then in my 30s when I was a personal development kind of person, there's no way I was going to be like, and by the way, I'm a fucking wizard, you know? Like that just would have been too far out for what I was capable of holding, and I still cared about some degree of trying to slot in to something. And what's happened in the last few years is not like in a sociopath kind of way. Like I still want to be part of society and I still want people to like me and shit like that. But there's just a less of a fear of like, well, if I own this, people will think I'm a fucking nutcase or whatever. And coinciding with that, it seems that the world is more open to it as well. but it's very hard to tell if that's just that I've just managed to find myself in that part of the bubble, so it looks like that, or actually the world is just reopening to occult and darker seeming things and all that. So,
but it's how you sell it as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it, because it's not really the thing that you're doing, it's how people are perceiving it. And that's why a lot of the practices, you know, if you put it under like neo-shamanism or tantra, you know, it's fine to do these rituals. But then as soon as you put like, you know, because I wanted to get on the subject of it because we're going to talk about it, like a satanic kind of vibe for it. You know, if you were using the pentagram sign as opposed to, you know, something else that people were okay with, it completely changed the perception. And that's why I think it's interesting too, like hearing that you've got a background in sales, because it's like, so do I. And from a young age, I learned that it's all about how things are perceived and how you get things across. Yeah. And you need to do it in a different way for different people. So yeah, I'm really interested to like how, because I agree, because I've been practicing magic for quite a while, but only really in the last like few years has it felt like okay to mention it, like almost like coming out of the magical closet kind of thing. But I've been being able to put it as a yoga teacher, I can put it under yoga, you know, like I can 100%. Just like put it under that umbrella. Because so now we're on the subject. I saw a post that you put on your Dark Wizard Media page today about how you mentioned kind of a lot of New Agers are kind of coming back to Christianity and stuff. And an author of mine mentioned this ages ago as a phenomenon that people get really excited about these new concepts and ideas, but then over time they end up going back to it. And maybe it's out of fear. Maybe it's just like the path of least resistance. Like your psyche is so ingrained with these beliefs that we've grown up with that we just default to that. So I'm really interested to hear your point of view on that.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to it. So the phenomenon that I've seen is a lot of New Age crew. I'm mostly women, but a lot of that crew, you know, I follow. I'm more aware of what a lot of female leaders and practitioners are doing, because there's, you know, especially in the Instagram world or whatever, this is a lot more visible. That there's some dudes doing cool stuff, but there's a lot more women that I am aware of in the, you know, witchy healer kind of spaces. You know, obviously that's been quite a feminine place. And yeah, I've noticed a few, none of my real close friends, but quite a few more acquaintances that they haven't gone like born again Christian, which is kind of how I wrote it on the thing, you know. It's more like the Christ consciousness, so like the spiritualist Christian kind of path, you know, like the Christ consciousness or the Sophia or that kind of stuff. And, you know, firstly, I just want to say, like, I'm not, before I say anything slightly mean or humorous, I'm not shitting on anyone's path. You know, I feel that we find what we need to find when we need to find it. But I do notice often with that particular path, which I do understand the appeal of, there can come also a wave of righteousness, and there can be this divorcing of, oh, and by the way, I don't do any of that weird magical stuff anymore, and astrology, forget that, you know, now I'm like a good Christian girl again, you know, but it's not Christian like goes to church. No, it's more like Christ consciousness. And if you look at where Christianity showed up in the development of cultures and stuff over time, you know, it's the epitome of like a viral system. You know, it comes in and it's a very sophisticated conglomeration of previous practices and beliefs that actually hits in some ways a new level of sophistication in terms of its ability to absorb other things. So, you know, like we have the kind of Roman-backed Christian thing when that really unrolls through, like, you know, post-Jesus era. Okay, this guy now becomes the figurehead for good versus evil, you know, and this other character becomes the symbol of evil. This is going to be the devil, which, your practices look a lot like the devil. You should stop those because that's our bad guy. But, it has a mastery of reworking narratives, which absorbed a lot of narratives from a lot of places. But it also comes with an irresistible level of certainty for some people, which is there's one true God, 10 rules, one God, very clear. And this is the same thing we see. It's very simple and very black and white, which is the same as when we see to kind of these return to these kind of, what do you call them? What's the name for those kind of leaders that are like populist leaders, you know, like the Donald Trumps or the Tony Abbotts or whatever. Someone who comes in like, look, we're going to keep the Mexicans out. We're going to keep the boat people out. And it's like, to a lot of young people, it's like, that's fucking terrible. But to a lot of more like middle Australia or middle America or working class America or whatever, who are maybe in economic insecurity, whatever, it's like finally someone who just made it safe and made the problem real simple, you know? And the Christianity, just don't be bad. Don't do anything with these lower chakras down here. Don't be banging. Don't be having sex. Don't put things up your ass. Don't be gay. Don't fucking steal. And give yourself to Jesus, and it's all good. It all will be. And it's like, fuck, that's very simple.
Yeah. Or if you happen to stick something up your ass, you can come and give us some money and confess, and then it's all good again. So
that's definitely the Catholic model, but the Christ consciousness model doesn't really do the guilt thing. I've known, you know, and also the new school, because I went to church last year. I went to one of those churches at Gold Coast that really kind of you know, Aussie evangelical style, and like I wanted to see what the deal was, you know, and what I didn't have this yet, but you know, what I could see that works is the state activation is quite beautiful. You know, like we're accessing love, we're accessing surrender, we're accessing some beautiful peak spiritual states like love, surrender, faith. You know, these are getting activated, and also the deal. You know, they always talk about deals with the devil, but there's a lot of Christianity is kind of a deal with the devil in its, or it's a deal with Jesus or whatever. And the deal has become simplified over time. So the deal used to be, which I almost trust the old school more, because it's like, you know, it's not easy. You've got to be, you know, you look at those kind of classic, what's that movie, The Witch? Have you seen The Witch?
No.
You know that, oh my God, it's so good. So, but it's that set in that classic settler era of America where things were tough, you know, they're just eking out survival, and they're all very God-fearing. And the slightest little thing, and it's like, witch, you know, like you just step outside the line slightly, and it's like, witch. But I feel like the marketing plan of Christianity has evolved quite a lot. And part of the marketing plan, and I don't know, this was a conscious thing, but let's just say that whether it is or isn't, part of the marketing plan became, we need to make this simple. We can't be sending people to hell and fucking damning people's lifestyles and critiquing, or people don't want that anymore. So we make the deal simple. Take Jesus into your heart and you're in. That's it. That's all there is. There's not like follow all these complicated rules and don't fuck this up. It's like, look, just give your heart to this entity, to this construct, and you'll be saved. That's the new school. That's my grasp of the new school of Christianity, the kind of Hillsongy kind of and evangelical. And then the kind of Christ consciousness crew, I haven't really gone deep into it, but it just feels like the same kind of flavor, you know? It's just a bit more spiritual. And it's kind of like just taking this energy of this being into you. It does elevate. Like I work a lot with Hawkins scale of consciousness when I built Spiral and all that stuff. And I would say that like the Christ consciousness sort of flavor sits at about 600 on the scale. So it's quite a high, beautiful frequency. But the only part I disagree with is there still can be this little bit of dogma that comes with it. And that dogma very much leads to a negating of everything else. So whatever it's not this thing where like whatever works for you works. It's like, well, unfortunately they're still doing the ayahuasca, but maybe they'll come to Christ eventually. You know, it's like there still is, it's judgment light. It's not fire and brimstone judgment, but it's still like this judgment piece. And there's a self-judgment of like, yeah, the things that I used to do, I don't do those anymore. And a big part of my crusade, like the whole Dane Tomas Instagram or Dark Wizard Media thing, is this mission to integrate light and dark. You know, it's this mission to break past the duality separation of the light is good and the dark is bad. Up is good and down is bad.
It's just like a lot of absolutism.
That's not a truth.
I think that's just the underlying thing of it. Like, it's just always this. But then the pendulum tends to swing, because those people that completely cut out all these things end up swinging the other direction in some way. So yeah, I think it's just about finding the balance between the two. And I think, because you said, like, I think there's a lot of positives to Christianity and religion and all this stuff, but I think it's just the packaging that it comes in, like the product, what you're getting, once you open it, you're like, oh, you're filled with all this like amazing stuff. But like the packaging's so outdated that it's really detrimental for like really the world. Like you've even said, it has had that viral kind of effect, but they packaged it up so well and sold it so well. Like I saw a quote ages ago in a book, and it said like the devil is the best salesman that Christianity ever had, because like, you can say, oh, you've got this and this and this, but then the devil, and then sign them up.
Yeah. Christianity kind of needs the devil, and it needs something to save you from. If we introduce like the clause of like everything that there is okay and is part of the universe, and the universe is functioning perfectly, all of a sudden it's like, well, I don't fucking need to be saved then, do I? Like if it's like, the last thing that can drop into that mix is, and this is the part they kind of argue with, is like any idea of you being your own God or you being the divine. It's like, no, like that's like a new age lie. Actually, only Jesus is, or only God can be that. And it's like, that's the part where I'm like, oh, that's, to me, seems to be like trying to negate a fundamental metaphysical truth, which is where all the magical and hermetic and all the traditions that I have any interest in some shape or form kind of agree or recognize like the microcosm macrocosm link, like whether we're talking classical tantra or whether we're talking Jungian psychology or what, in some shape or form there's this recognition that like, oh, you're it. Like it's you and you, and whether it's hermetic magic and it's like, okay, the small is the large, or whether it's the the tree of life, and it's like that's your body, but that's the structure of the cosmos. Like there's this deep truth that is empowering, and I think that's where religion has an interest in you not being fully empowered, because you need to subscribe to it. You need to be in a club,
Yeah, exactly. And that was a big distinction I saw between religion and magic. Someone, I think, summed it up and said, like, religion is thy will be done, whereas magic is my will be done. And I think it's interesting as well, because everyone says that they want sovereignty and they want like all the power themselves, but then you also have to take responsibility for all the decisions you make. And I think that's what happens. People feel empowered, but then they're like, wow, I'm actually responsible. Like there's no one kind of parenting me at the moment. And so if they go back to this religion, then they technically can't blame themselves for anything. And they kind of like giving their will. And there's something empowering in that, like for people to give their will. There's something empowering
about that. And one, you get your daddy back, but two, it's interesting because this surrender piece, like I feel like, and the terms can get messy, but with the Western esoteric tradition and with kind of, if we really follow the magical path, ultimately, or we still come to that surrender place eventually where it's like, oh, like the more stuff I'm manifesting, the more power I get, and the more I follow the path, the more I start to be like, hang on a minute, am I making this happen, or is the universe wanting to do this through me? And, the more ego dissolution that happens, the less I want anything, and the more it starts to be clear that magic only works if it's in alignment with the cosmos anyway. So we start to get to this same kind of place where it's like, and the language is sticky. Like I typically don't use the word God, but occasionally I might, but I don't usually use the word God. But it's like, some days it is like, this is what I'm fucking calling down, and I have a sense of what I'm here to manifest. And other days it's like, okay, like I work with the construct of the void a lot, and or the black hole or the void is one construct that I like to work with. And it's like that grasp, you are handing over to the life force itself. It's like, actually my small self had enough will to get me to climb up the mountain, but then essentially I got struck by lightning, and the person that comes back down, that small self is dead anyway. So there's this kind of like weird mixture of like big self, little self kind of And I feel like the magician is a place where I've found myself playing, because it's one of the few archetypes that is prepared to, it's not the full mystic who's just given over completely. You know, it's not necessarily the full Rumi-esque, like love just comes through me and I'm not even here. It's like, well, I am here, but I know that I'm an illusion, but I'm still here. So I'm going to dance between the, like, you know, the ultimate reality and the personal reality, and can I have the best of both worlds, you know, and knowing actually, you know, that the great work of bringing God through the self is happening anyway. So I think even with the Christians and whoever, we're all on the same path. Sorry to keep rambling.
Sure. No, that's all good, bro. There's just two really good questions that I want to ask in there. One I'll ask first. So like the first thing that I'll touch on, but we'll come back to, is like the idea of mythic thinking. And I think that's the thing that people start doing spells and manifestation, but in the end, they want a map of the cosmos, right? And the map in their soul. Right. I'll come back to that, but I just wanted to voice it now. But the first thing I want to ask, because you touched on sometimes you manifest stuff and you know it's you, but then sometimes like you manifest things and it's something other than you. Because I've had this same phenomena where when I do magic a lot of the time, I feel like the universe always have this mischievous playfulness to it, because I'll ask for something and I'll get it, but it'll usually come from, like, it pretty much always comes from the way that I don't look. So like, if I'm like, okay, I'm going to manifest this, I'm looking in the direction I expect it to come, it'll just like creep around and smack me in the side. Yeah. And like, it's like playful little thing to it. And that's why it's weird that, like, I'm interested to hear like about how you view it. And I feel like, magic kind of works in the gaps. Magic works in the unseen.
Yes. Yeah. My grasp, and it's funny because I've really been heading back down my alignment to my artistic path, you know, and I've noticed that the art and the magic are getting better at the same rate, because it's some of the same skills, you know. And I think there's this paradox of like, my small self wants something to fulfill its incompleteness. You know, I need, because it's going to give me significance or security or fulfillment or something. And if I want to magic that into being, I'm actually going to have to get the small self out of the way long enough to call it through, which, you know, in doing so, the illusion of wanting or needing or lacking anything is revealed anyway, you know. But I'm still working with that smaller self because it's a part of me. And so I think there's this, and it's funny because the other bridge that I've come from is the personal development world, which I got a lot out of, but I feel like I eventually had to like choose to graduate, because it's just like an ego strengthener, you know. It's just like fucking building the ego. And it's like, I think I've got one now. I think I am personally developed, you know. Like, if I'm not personally developed at 42, do I really fucking need to build a bigger self-construct? Because actually I am going to die, and I probably am halfway through. So I should probably start preparing to be letting go, rather than like building more like fucking story about who I am, you know? And so there's this sense for me of that magic is this dance between, like art, the best shit comes through when I'm able to get myself out of the way, which is why, you know, the ability to use ritual and to get into altered states is so powerful, because it's like, you know, if I'm just sitting here at the breakfast table going, I want this, it's like there's this kind of small, it's like the will of my solar plexus, like that small will of like, yep, I want it, versus like if I can get everything out of the way and it's like my whole fucking channel is open. It's almost like the universe being like, well, if you're going to open this channel and let me pour through, I'll show you fucking everything, and I'll give you everything. And I think if we have been cultivating a good connection between the conscious and the unconscious, or between the small self and the big self, then the receiving of that everything is going to be in alignment with who we are. You know, it's like I less and less have to ask, is this what the real me wants, or is this just some egoic piece here? Because every desire that I've followed to its full conclusion has taken me to a much deeper part that is like, this is what you are here to do. Maybe not like how you thought when you were 25. Maybe that was a bit of a childish interpretation, but you were on the right. You still had a sniff of a deep impulse that was a part of like your soul speaking to you or whatever, you know, like you still, the fact that you wanted it was a clue that it is actually part of who you really are. So I think there's that dance between the part of me that doesn't know and then the part of me that is infinite, that is almost sometimes pushing. And it's almost sometimes like I'll do a ritual or something to call in my, God self or whatever. And I'm like, fuck, you're the one who wanted this to happen. Was it really the small self calling in the big self, or was the big self like, yep, I just need to get him to the mountain at midnight and then we'll be able to fucking come through, And it's like the small self's like, I'm going to do this so I get all this cool shit. And the big self's like, I have been lining this up for quite a while. And you have it, that ayahuasca journey or that ritual or that connection or, all that meditation, the one that actually fucking connects you to everything. And it's like, whoa, this is the real thing. This is oneness coming through, or this is bliss vibrating through, or whatever it is. Like those ones feel to me orchestrated by the universe more so than orchestrated by my personal self on my calendar being like, well, I should do another journey because it's time, because it's been 6 months or whatever. It's like, you get in the room and you're like, fuck, I've been brought here, so which has that kind of sense of like flipping who's in charge anyway,
Yeah, it's an interesting dance, and like it's kind of like affected me a lot, because at the start when I was doing Magick, I was like, well, if it doesn't go the way I planned it, this is my fault, because I should be the magician and everything should be going according to my will, right? Like my will is everything. But then over time, I've kind of like got that sense of surrender a little bit, but it's also trying to find the balance, because if I go too far over the other end of the surrendering, I feel like maybe I'm getting lazy as a magician and I'm just making excuses. Right. It's like, oh, I'm just like, just floating down the river, even though I'm not going where I want to get. So it's like that interesting dance between the two, because I think a lot of people might not manifest something, but then they'll just kind of
reframe it as like, well, that's what the universe, that's what was meant to be.
Yeah. So it's like, well, what are you actually doing then? Are you actually doing magic? Mm-hmm. And because I think it's, because we were going to talk about as well your journey with Lucifer and stuff and what you're doing. We'll get back to that. But I think it's really important, because what you touched on, creating art as well. And I think that's the idea, like the mix between the mystic and the magician, because like the mystic is kind of like downloading all the information and, and exploring the cosmos. But then the magician is actually creating something new in the cosmos. So creating something out of that, like taking their subjective synthesis of what they view the world as and painting it. And as time goes on, and I'm interested to hear your point of view of this, and that's kind of like what I see the cosmos at currently, right? So we're like, there's a void, there's this like infinite nothingness, but everything. And then all our consciousnesses are just convincing each other this is what the world is. And there's probably some kind of mathematical laws governing it, which I have no idea about. The more I try to look at it, the more it kind of disappears out of my grasp. But I think the flame of consciousness is like the one thing that seems to be across the board. And like, it's interesting to see the Lucifer archetype, or that like the Prometheus kind of archetype, the bringer of fire. It's interesting in the Christian tradition, it's seen as a bad guy, but like in the Greek tradition, like it's the savior of humanity. Prometheus steals the fire from the gods, like gives knowledge, and even Odin, right? So Odin in Norse mythology is kind of like the prince of isolate intelligence, the prince of darkness archetype, Lucifer kind of archetype, and brings like the runes and knowledge to humans and just says, here's the code to the matrix, go and figure out how to make some cool shit. But in Christianity, it's like, no, the knowledge is bad. So, I know that was a big loaded little rant, but I just wanted to kind of get across what I wanted to talk about, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot in there, but I mean, the first bit I want to latch onto is, I guess working with archetypes is a big part of it. And we live in a world that is still very literal. So, I can basically divide people into two categories based on, if I say I'm going to do what I'm currently doing, which is about 20 days in. And we, I'm some ways really hardcore and some ways super chill and super fucking lazy with magical or spiritual practices. And I, depending on which angle I'm looking at myself from, I'm not sure which is true. They're probably both true, like, so it's not like I'm doing these practices consistently every day and fucking whatever, but I dedicate a period of time. I set a clear intention. I work with certain things, and I've done this a lot of times, and always I fucking change as a person. That's really the game. I'm calling in certain qualities and certain aspects of self that I want to strengthen and develop. And you know, with the work I've been doing for the last fucking, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, we went through like, okay, maybe dial back even further. The kind of tantric journey really was like, okay, I need to develop my masculine. I'm a 30-year-old man. I'm going to do my David Data stuff. I'm connecting my purpose. I'm on mission. I'm cultivating presence. I'm fucking kickboxing. I'm meditating. I'm getting my will into the world, masculine, you know? And if I'm more masculine, I'm going to get hotter chicks and I'm going to feel like I'm more empowered, blah, blah, blah. Do a bunch of that. I definitely fucking changed, right? I changed as a person. I felt that I became more of an impactor into the world. And I also started to feel a bit burnout and a bit dry after 4 or 5 or 6 years of that. And then through the sort of tantric world and tantric scene, I stumbled into feminine work and I started doing like embodiment stuff and erotic activation and cultivating the inner female and feminine. And it's so my understanding of tantra switched from like the man's job is to be in his masculine so he could polarize to a woman. It's like, well, yeah, but I've done that. And it's only half the solution, right? So then it became like feelings, eros, connection, relating. And it's like my woman started to come online. And that was probably another 3 or 4 year journey. And then it started to be like, fuck, I'm kind of a man and a woman. That's pretty interesting. And then I went more down the mystery school path and got the framework of the kind of Eros, Gamos, fucking inner marriage stuff. And it became like, cool, can these two parts start to collaborate together and become one? And then I become more of a complete being, blah, 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 blah. Fast forwarding all that to say, I feel like that piece is, I don't know if it's done, but it's very integrated for me to a level that is far beyond who I used to be. And then my journey became more about the vertical integration, which was the light and the dark. And I look at my life and it's like, well, in this period of my life, I was a good boy. I was trying to be good. I would try to do the things that, and in this period of my life, I was a bad boy. I would do these things. And it's interesting because in that time, I was sexier. I was more physical. I was more grounded, but I had less direction in life and I was more, and then it became like, oh, hang on. Just like I did the mask femme balance, I'm now was learning the light dark balance, you know? And so that was my journey for a little while. And so then I did a ISTA level 1 and 2 a few weeks ago, which I've done many, many times. And it's been a lot about landing the soul and the soul journey for quite a few years. And I had this sense of like, oh, it's like my soul is fully in my body. The spirit and the matter are pretty integrated. It's almost like there's just this last little bit where my soul hasn't fully just fucking penetrated into earth 3D life all the way. It's like held back just a few percent. That percentage is everything of like showing myself, you know, like revealing the full power and fucking glory and vulnerability and fucked upness and brilliance of what I am. And I was like, yeah, the person you would work with if you want to nail that is Lucifer. You know, if we want an archetype of, I was doing these processes and I just kept getting the vision. There's a drawing from Dante's Inferno people will have seen. It's very famous. You know, it's like a line drawing, but it's like Lucifer flying as an angel downwards as he's just been kicked out of heaven. It's called The Fall. And like I was in some, you know, erotic process or body shaking kind of vibrating trauma release type of process. And I just kept seeing like, fuck that. I just kept seeing it over and over. And I did a couple of rituals where I invoked Lucifer as a guide, and the sweetness and the empowerment that came in was fucking phenomenal. And of course, you know, I still have bits of Christian conditioning of like, are you fucking out of your mind? Like you don't, you know, that's maybe not okay. You know, this little like, I don't know if you should do that. And I'm like, well, I'm trusting my embodiment and my anchoredness here, and what I'm calling in feels like the right medicine.
And I think that makes them more potent because there is a little bit of that. So that like would, like in my experience, like give you a bit more a jolt of energy for it and make it more interesting, because otherwise it gets a little bit boring.
It means you got to mean it. Well, you've got to mean it, right?
Yeah.
I'm not invoking like Cinderella. I'm invoking fucking Lucifer here, you know?
Yeah.
And so I designed for myself a little program, 66 days of practices that include normal ceremonial magic, so the middle pillar and the lesser banishing ritual. But I flipped the pentagrams upside down because, ooh, you're not supposed to do that. And, you know, instead of calling in the angels, I call in Lucifer in all 4 directions, you know, and like, and then the other practices not seem very Luciferian to other people, but they're practices for helping me land and strengthen my nervous system and anchor deeper in my body and in matter, which is really what this whole thing is about. So there's some specific Qigong practices I'm doing. There's physical training and jiu-jitsu and that kind of stuff, which is again like earth, matter, connecting to earth. And it's interesting what's been happening because some blocks that I had around my music just moved because there's this kind of like, I'm not afraid to be on planet Earth. I'm not afraid to be judged. I'm not afraid to be projected on, which I guess is one of the superpowers of Lucifer. If we tune into an alternative story and we're like, okay, so this is one of the brightest and most beautiful angels that was sent to Earth to hold a point for some reason. You know, this is a more esoteric reading of the story. In the Theosophical Society and Alice Bailey's teachings, they said that Lucifer was one of the solar angels that came to Earth to bring intelligence to man when man was an animal. So it's a very different kind of a, you know, and he's from Venus. He's an energy that came from Venus in their story and brought the light of consciousness into matter. And so some interesting shit's been happening, but nothing horrific. And this is this thing, it's been Lucifer. It's not been the devil, which I did a bunch of work with the devil a few years ago, but it hasn't got the same charge. It's got this angelic quality, but the quality of an angel that can penetrate matter and that also is unafraid of judgment. You know, it's like, well, they say everything about me. Everything society, everything humanity's ever done has been blamed on me, you know? And it's like, and I'm here, and I'm actually here loving you guys. I'm actually here to hold a point so you can grow and evolve. That's kind of the energy that I've been working with it in. So
yeah, and it's like we were saying, like it's all about how you view it. And even like the devil and even like the word Satan and stuff actually was like a title. It's like the nemesis, like the enemy kind of thing. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
And so like you're calling naturally, I feel like if you're going to play with that archetype, you're naturally calling in something that is the opposite of you or like your nemesis. And while it might be like a good idea to meet that, it's probably not going to be very harmonious with what you're trying to do. It's probably like your natural resistance kicking stuff up, and it's just going to cause a lot of chaos in your life, I think, as well. And it's interesting as well that like just how we view things. So there's that kind of like duality between, okay, we've got the angels, which are good, and then we've got like the demons, which are bad. But then if you actually look at the old grimoires, man, some of those angels was fucking scary. Like the art of the angels and so there's demons that, you know, can heal and can find lost stuff. And there's angels that can kill. Like it's just, yes. And
most of those demons were previously other people's gods who got rebranded and filed in a book that, you know, got demoted, you know? And so there's this whole thing of what I feel is happening with this work, which is not me saying, I'm not saying I don't believe in things as external entities. People always get this kind of mixed up with me. I'm not saying that. I hold both the kind of archetypal transpersonal view and the kind of like, oh yeah, we're doing magic with whoever or whatever. But a big part of the power that comes from this kind of thing is collapsing the narratives that have been conditioned into us that are through our fucking nervous system, DNA, emotional body, everything, which, you know, whatever someone thinks, you know, it's like you get in an argument on Facebook or whatever with someone who's a Christian and very quickly like, oh, so you read this book from this era. You actually don't have a grasp of where these myths and structures came from at all. And so the thing you believe is almost like, you know, Christianity edition 1950 from the 1960s or whatever. And it's like even the construct that has been brought into that thing has been changed and edited and remixed all the way fucking down. And, you know, I did a bit of, I listened to some of Jordan Peterson's early stuff on the best shit he ever did. Like I'm less interested in his kind of, fights with the social justice warrior sort of thing. I kind of think that's a bit of a, for me personally, I think he took a wrong turn from his gifts, which was his grasp of archetypes and maps of meaning, but that's less, since you're not going to get famous from that, you know? But he had an amazing podcast series, which was him archetypally unpacking Old Testament Bible stories, and extremely knowledgeable about this, you know, and his read will be so different than what a Sunday school teacher might have taught someone. And it's like, you know, they do the story of Abraham or whatever, and he just goes into like the meaning of the construct of sacrifice for humans, like how our life changed when we figured out the idea of sacrifice, the idea of like, I give up something to gods or the universe or whatever, and I get something back, and how, you know, once upon a time that was an animal or maybe even a member of our tribe, but then eventually it becomes like a symbolic sacrifice, you know, and it's like, you realize how fucking ancient these stories that have been all smushed together in the Bible are, that, you know, they weren't written by Christian people. Like there's Mesopotamian and Babylonian and fucking who knows what in there that is like, the way it's being read now is very likely not what those stories meant. And so there's this whole hodgepodge of stuff that people, they don't like it if you unpack the reality that these stories aren't yours, you know, and they don't really mean what you think they mean.
And that's the thing. I think no one really looks behind the curtain, or really, and like most people don't want to look behind the curtain or kind of research it, because it all comes up like it's pretty evident. Like even like in the Goths, right? Like the Germanic tribes, when they were trying to convert them to Catholicism, Christianity and stuff like that, they needed to bring in all these pagan elements. Like the cross is a pagan thing. So like I was reading that when they were trying to convert them, they're like, well, we got these cool Thor's hammers. Like, and you know, so like, what are you going to give us if we convert to Christianity? And like, well, we need a gang chain. Like, so what are you going to give us? If we're going to rock your gang, we need a chain. And they're like, all right, we'll come back, and they're like, all right, well, you know, our gods slay dragons. Like Sigurd slayed a dragon. What do your saints do? Like, oh, well, we'll come back. Like, we got one. You know, so it's like. And it's changing, and especially, and that's fine. Like things evolve and change, but the thing is, it's hypocritical because they're saying it's like the word of God or something that is like immortal and timeless and eternal, but yet it's constantly changed. And
it's marketing, you know, and the marketing has evolved every century, every decade, every whatever, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think this construct of the magician, or this idea of the magician that you and I and many others are interested in, is more someone who can play with narratives than someone who would let themselves get trapped inside of a narrative. And so for me, it's like, cool, Christianity is a rich tapestry of ideas and stories and structures and beliefs. Any independent human being should be very careful which beliefs they choose to adopt, and you may need to make alterations to those beliefs if your life isn't working out the way that you want, you know? And I think that's a nice piece that, as I've come back to Magick as my primary operating system, which is what I think of it as, really, I came back after a decade plus of, and even being a leader in the personal development and belief change and transformation realm. So all that has come across with me, and it's like, well, we don't just take on beliefs unquestioning. Every belief is a piece of programming. I'm going to make sure that fits this organism and my life trajectory and who I believe that I am and the cosmology that I hold and all that. And it's like, I'm not just going to take on bad code because I spent 20 years deprogramming that kind of stuff. And I think that's a really good prerequisite for anyone wanting to do magic. Like if they haven't done cleanup work, it's going to be difficult because you're going to hit all your limits. But two, whatever spiritual systems, especially new ones, you're taking on, not coming in with the belief that like everything, you know, like you go to Vipassana and it's an amazing place to develop your meditation. But like in the first day alone, Goenka lays down a shitload of limiting beliefs, you know? And I'm like, whoa. It's like, you may never become enlightened, even if you meditate. It's like, delete. Much better, Goenka, will be, you are already enlightened, and doing this practice will help you realize that. It's like, thank you for the blessing, versus like, you know, this is not going to work. It's like, that's not the suggestion I want to hear at the beginning of my 10-day journey, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to
you go.
There's I've just got a list of questions here, and I definitely want to make sure I get through them. And there's one particular one that I really want to talk about. We were kind of touching on earlier, like the idea of like you were talking about your idea of the soul and the cosmos, and I think that's the main thing, right? So like we've got, I guess, chaos magic, or like chaos magic, for anyone who doesn't know, it's like basically like a breaking down magic to what works. Like we were talking about earlier, like manifestation. But then what's kind of missing in that idea or paradigm is like a mythic worldview, or like an idea of the soul, or something that, like, yeah, you can think about and believe in after, like, post-death, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm really interested in all your work so far, that like what your current map is, and because I think that's what people are chasing, because I want to reiterate to anyone listening to this or watching this that, like, it sounds like we're hating on Christianity a lot, but I don't think either of us mean that way. It's just that I think we both feel there's better systems to represent that concept which you are just trying to embody and trying to chase, and it's human nature to want that, and I think it's important to want that. But yeah, I'm interested to see your model, right? So like if you knew that you were gonna like die in the next like 7 days, and you needed to give a model to your next self to start with, like what would be the current model that you would give, or what's the best thing that you could kind of
Nice. Firstly, I want to say, you're super right. It's like every system has its glitches. And so we're ripping on the Christian one because it's still so dominant. And the chaos magic and basically postmodernism. So chaos magic is a product of the 80s, which is postmodern thinking and blah, blah, blah. Frees us up amazingly. There's no one story. Everything can work and nothing can work. And that frees you up. But then you try to live a life like that. And it's like, where's my direction in this? Which is why people go back from New Age, which doesn't have one construct. It's just a soup of stuff. It's like, actually, being a spiritual Christian is probably better than being a lost New Ager who's like, should I drink ayahuasca? Am I a tantric? Do I watch? So for me, I had very much been influenced by Ken Wilber's integral theory. Really helped me build a big and quite complicated synthesis of how human development fits together, and so on and so on. I came across Bruce Lyon's work, who founded Haydn Mystery School, and he is very influenced by certain elements of Theosophical Society, certain elements of all kinds of things. He's integrally quite informed, etc. But the big central model that I came across of his that really helped me organize things better was this model of the void, the soul, and the personality as a big, very generalized structure that all the other teachings can be kind of filed into. And to make it neater, he kind of anchors it to some cosmology. So it's like you can think of the personality as planet Earth. It's the solid, it's the body mind, it's this person who's right here, right now. It's solid, it's dense, it thinks it's real. The soul will be the sun, which really plugs into our kind of Western esoteric traditions very well, heliocentric Western traditions, the son of God, the one true whatever. They're very soul-based. Christianity itself is quite soul-based, the ancient Greeks, the Egyptians, and so on. So the sun will be equivalent to the soul. And then one thing that I found kind of genius with his model, which is also an embodied thing, it's not just an idea, is this idea of anchoring the void to the black hole and to dark matter. And so we have this sense of planets go around suns, but suns orbit the black hole at the center of the galaxy. So we have this sense of like the mystery itself, which is deep and empty, is infinite. It's the oneness. It's, you can file all those concepts in there, but actually to enter the void, there's no constructs. The soul is the spark that emerges from that one, which has a sort of a sense of self, but it kind of also knows where it came from. And then the personality, the person, Dane Tomas, lives here, is 42 years old, is the mind and the body. And then a lot of the work begins to be, how do I integrate the body, mind, the soul, and the void or the infinite part into one being? And so that just gave me a map that can anchor to actually, our solar system and a physical layout. And then there's all this other infinite complexity that can be filed within that. But that was a cosmological map for me that meant I could go back to reading Crowley, or back to reading Western esoterics, or back to reading, or even jump across to Eastern philosophy and go like, these guys aren't really doing soul. They're doing straight void to personality. If you're a Ramana Maharshi, or you're non-dual tantra. They're not doing individual soul usually. They're doing like the oneness and then the personality, which is the drop in the ocean, you know? And then you come to the Western side and it's like, no, there's a soul getting, depending which structures you're using, you know, this idea of a soul that reincarnates over and over, obviously is a Hindu idea. That's the soul level. So that model for me will be one of the beauty, I can draw it like 3 rings in a diagram and go, hey, self, before you reincarnate, here's one cosmic map you should do. And here's like, you know, a few tips for life, like learn how to sell things, get a good morning practice, you know. Yeah.
Because that's what I'm really interested in, right? And we'll talk about it more in a second. But yeah, because I'm interested in your idea of, I guess, reincarnation and like kind of and death and what might happen. Obviously, none of us really know. But for example, like that's one thing that really sent me on the magic path as opposed to religion, because mainstream Christianity seemed linear. It's like you start here and then you go here or here, right? This is your end destinations. But then as life taught me, everything seems cyclical. And I was like, well, this is linear and like everything else seems cyclical. It doesn't really make any sense. And so the idea of reincarnation seems rational and logical to me. But I guess I'm interested to see your perspective on it, because I see 2 main ideas around reincarnation. One, that you have a specific soul and that specific soul gets reincarnated and you kind of like can take back some of your souls, like starting with a new character, but you get some of your skill set back. But then there's the other idea is that we kind of like all return to the ocean. And so, and that would explain people with past life experiences, right? So whether, like, I guess the way I can summarize it, if someone had a past life experience, it could be from their direct line of soul, right? Or it could just be, or they're just pulling a random past life from the pool, like the collective unconscious.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear your perspective on these ideas.
Yeah, I've thought about this and debated with this and had some experiences that give different impressions of this. And I have thought both of those 2 things, you know, like you'll often hear New Agers being like, well, I was Joan of Arc in a past life. And it's like, look, just because you had a glimpse of that doesn't mean you were that. But it may mean you had a glimpse of the connection to that experience because that's somehow relevant to you and that's coming through. But it seems to me a little bit funny how we only have these flashbacks to, like, you know, I was this famous person or I was this, and it's like, why am I not getting flashback of 400 lives where I was a peasant, you know? Because statistically there would have to have been a lot of those, you know, there would have to be fucking shitloads of like, oh, that's another life. I lived to the age of 38. I was a farmer and then I died, you know, like that would fast forward, next one.
Yeah.
I have had more and more embodied experiences of being a soul since I started working with those traditions, which is kind of the same for everything. You know, you take on a construct, you take it in your body, you start to live it. It's like, you know, I started working with chakras, then I started having chakras. I was like, fuck, that's, you know, and it's like, did I uncover them or did I install them? You know, that's a big question that I can't presume to fully have the answer to. But what I do know is I've had some interesting dialogues where I did an experiment 2019 where I started microdosing and going to Bikram yoga like every fucking day, you know, or I'd microdose every couple of days, but I go to Bikram every day. And that I wanted to pair these 2 practices to see if I could speed up my yogic experience in that environment. And one day I had slightly more than a microdose. It wasn't like tripping hard, but I was aware of, you know, that I was kind of psychedelically activated, and I had kind of but I wasn't tripping. I was just really hyper aware. I was in kind of camel and I had this really tight grief thing. And I kind of was like, fuck, that's intense. So I kind of closed up and lay down, and then just a kind of thing just came through. And it was like, my experience was like, it was my soul talking to me. And it was kind of like, hey, you're 41 now. It's taken us till now to get kind of merged enough that I can operate through you and with you. So it's kind of like, now you've actually downloaded fully. And, you know, I'm laying there like, what the fuck, you know? And it's like this kind of sense of, it was really hard for me to get us into this dimension. I had to like really choose my timing. And it's almost like this vision of like being above the planet and seeing the planet in like fast forward and the clouds moving in time lapse. And like, I needed to get you here. And the only portal into here was to get you born in 1978, north of England to Pat and Ted. Sorry if that was a shitty landing for you. I had to take what I could get, and all the things that you've lived, I needed you to live to get to here. And now we're basically ready to start life. You know, it was kind of like you're basically ready to start. You've had your apprenticeship. You've downloaded enough of you for us to actually live for real. I was driving home like, what the fuck, man? But I got this real sense of like, oh, that was my soul. And it was like, it was a very clear sense of something that is older and wiser than my day-to-day body-mind construct, but that I have had a much stronger connection to since around then, where it's like, it's kind of here all the time, but I can still lapse into habitual behaviors. And, you know, if I scroll Instagram for 2 hours, I will have slightly less connection to that. And if I do the middle pillar for hours and Qigong and my fucking void meditations and shit, I am that, you know?
Yeah.
It was a very clear sense of this is a being that is on a mission of sorts and is lived and has done this a bunch of times, you know? And what I can say is in the mystery school traditions that I've been a part of, there is a map that eventually we progress towards soul death. We incarnate multiple times, and the fourth initiation in that structure is the soul itself starts to hand itself back to the void or back to the ocean, which starts to kind of burn through, and its ultimate is to kind of also die and merge with the infinite. So in the same way that the body mind gives itself to the soul and the person becomes a soul initiate, so you're living as a soul full time, eventually the soul, after how many reps or how much whatever, is like, okay, I fucking surrender to the big one, you know, and then that is able to come through fully. And so it's like a person with enough of a hole in it that the soul can come in, and then a soul with enough of a hole in it that the void can come through that, and the mystery itself or God or whatever you want to call it can operate through that. So that's how I think of it currently.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, because a lot of the traditions that I kind of have evolved through, the magical traditions, a lot of it is about like reinforcing your soul, right? So imagine like if you're, you know, kind of like you're an ocean of consciousness, you evaporate up into the clouds, and then when you drop as a rain droplet, that's like your life, and then suddenly you're back in. But it's trying to like, I guess, reinforce, like armor up your drop so you can take more of you to the next life, and trying to like immortalize your consciousness a little bit. But I imagine as well that like humans you'd get bored eventually. If you've had like hundreds of thousands of lifetimes, I guess you would want a complete fresh start in some way or another. So I've never heard of that like soul burn concept before, but it makes sense. Like, a big part of me, like my ego side of me is like, nah, never gonna let that happen.
Yeah.
But I can understand I'd get bored eventually. You'd want a big change, or at least a shift.
Well, also I think it's just on, if we look at it on the biggest cosmic level, the soul, as big and beautiful and immortal seeming as it is compared to the human self, it's still only like a divine spark, you know? And so eventually it's got to go home. And back to kind of Bruce's model, it's like, well, the black hole is there, and eventually all the fucking stars are going to get sucked in. And it might be fucking billions of years, but eventually, you know, the Big Bang comes back to the Big Crunch. You know, the mystery will reclaim everything eventually. You know, even the biggest, most shiny suns, even the most powerful souls, they all got to come home eventually.
Or
you know,
recycled remanifestation. Because like I don't know if you've ever heard of the Temple of Set. It's like that's one of like the main mystery schools that I kind of started studying under early on. And their kind of word is remanifestation, and that makes sense because that's kind of how I see like black holes in the suns, right? Like the black hole sucks everything in to a finite point, gets really hot, explodes, turns into a sun, sucks everything back, and boom, exploding. It makes sense. There's one other thing I just quickly wanted to touch on.
Go for it.
Because you said it before, installing software, right? And that's one of the first things when I read one of your books. I think it was the one about the spiral, clear your shit.
Clear your shit.
Yeah. So you talked about installing software, and that's kind of how I see like building up a belief system and a magical system, right? And it's interesting because when I was started getting into magic, I started getting into martial arts as well. So not only was I reading all this esoteric stuff, I was also doing very practical things where I was installing software. And my teacher said that, the instinctual movements will always move faster than your analytical, right? And like, in fact, if you look in psychology, it says like one book said that your instincts move 10,000 times faster than your analytical like decisions to make actions. And so he said, if I go to punch you, and then you think about how you're going to react, I'm always going to hit you. But so it's like that, is it like unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and then unconscious competence? So I see it as a similar thing. When we're doing magic, we want to operate from our unconscious. And so it's installing stuff enough that it's automatic. And I think that's what you were talking about when people go into ayahuasca journeys and things like that. Is that in my experience from these journeys is that it's just unloading or making conscious all the stuff that's been in my subconscious. And so we might have been on this new age path for the last 4 years and playing around with all this stuff. But if from childhood we were Christian or childhood we were this, that's what's going to come up. Your subconscious is going to project this imagery. And so, do you see this a similar way? And like, how do you, I guess, what advice would you give to people who are wanting to choose their map and like where they would kind of start with that?
I would say that there's a piece I used to teach to spiral practitioners to help them understand what they're doing when they do change work with people. And it's like, basically we can categorize, like I'm a person, I want to achieve X result, and I hit a roadblock. I need to work out one of two things to be able to quickly move past that. Is what I need a constraint removal, or is what I need skill development? And so I'll kind of go into that a little bit because it's probably not common language, but like, so maybe I need to install some new stuff, some skills. Maybe I need to do some more reps of skills I already have, or I need to acquire an understanding I don't have. Or maybe I need to deprogram or remove some habits or some beliefs that I have. And those two things are two different things. And you can't fix one by trying to do the other necessarily. They might help each other, but it's kind of like, okay, I want to build a business, but I don't know how to, I'm not making $1 million a year. It's because I've got money blocks. And I can come look at business and go, it's because you don't know how to market and sell. It's not your blocks. It's that you need to learn how to build a marketing funnel. You need to get a product people want. You need to learn how to sell it. You need to price it properly. And it's like, no, but I've got money blocks. It's like, well, maybe you do, but you're only going to really know that if you try to do these things. Here, read this book, take these 3 steps, do this over and over and again. And then if you still can't do it and you're in some sort of traumatic freeze, curl up in a ball, then maybe I'll believe you that you've got like blocks. And other times it's like the person knows the stuff. They are an expert. I've built marketing funnels. I've led teams. I've made cool products. I know how to do this and how to do that. But I just seem to get stuck at this level over and over again. And be like, cool, you got a block. You got something in you that says earning more than $250,000 a year makes you a bad person. Let's find that. And we shed that. And like 2 months later, I get this call. I just had an $80,000 day. And it's like, whoa, shit. They didn't learn anything new, but they removed the block. So I would say that let's bring that to the kind of I'm educating myself about different traditions and practices and whatever. You need to know what it is you're looking for, and you need to know who you are coming to this thing. And so I know this is long-winded, but I'm just going to rip it out.
It's good.
That's cool, yeah?
I mean, it's a pretty complex question. So.
Like I started studying Buddhism when I was 19, and probably wasn't until I was about 22 that I was reading some random book, and it was really about how karma works and how the structure of it was kind of similar to what we asked about the soul. It was like how a person basically, when they die, they're a collection of aggregated stuff, and as that stuff kind of burns away, it's kind of like a bundle of stuff. And as the bundle of stuff peels apart, there's nothing in the middle ultimately. And I was like, fucking what? And I kind of clocked in that moment, there's no soul in the system. I've assumed this whole time that there must be a soul, you know, and whatever branch, I can't remember what branch of Buddhism I was reading or whatever, but it was like there was very clearly spelled out, if you peel apart this bundle of basically impurities, there's nothing. And I was just like, fuck. And also it was very clear, there is no being at the center making sure this process happens. There is not an old gentleman in the sky making sure, or there isn't, you know, an alligator sitting in the hell realms measuring feathers and shit. It's just sorting itself out. And I just remember being like, fuck, I understand this. And I've been studying Buddhism at a university level for like a couple of years. And then I realized how deep my Christian assumptions were, even though I didn't identify as Christian. I was like, I'm looking at everything, and the invisible belief is like, yeah, God exists. There's heaven and hell, and there's like sin. And even though I don't live those concepts, and I didn't even go to a Christian school, but I was in a Christian society, they were just in there. So I think if I was now shopping for new traditions or new practices, I would have some sense of like, what do I want to get from this? Why would I go and study? You know, I can see Tantra illuminated on that. Why would I go and study like non-dual Shiva Tantra? Why the fuck would I do that? And it's like, well, I feel like that might connect me to a greater sense of the universe or a greater sense of like the divine, you know? That's probably a pretty good system for that, you know? Why would I go and get into like witchcraft or whatever? It's like, well, I want to be connected to earth and the traditions and the seasons and a kind of culture that it's like, that would be a good choice, you know? But when someone's like, okay, I've got money issues, I'm going to go and do 3 more ayahuasca ceremonies. I'm like, what about that makes you think it's going to change your money beliefs? Like, go and do fucking NLP or something, you know? Like, it's just the wrong, which is not saying ayahuasca isn't good. If it was like, I connect to my vision of who I really am, I'd be like, fuck it, go do that, or go do some, you know, survival, whatever they, you know, like a challenge of what they call it, you know? Yeah. It's knowing what tools you're looking for with at least some hypothesis of, I'm going to go down this path for this reason. Yeah. And having that discernment of like, well, this place is, you know, you don't go to an auto mechanic to like, I don't know, get a new pool. But like to what I see people doing that, of like, that's why I went and practiced Buddhism for 8 years. And it's like, that has not helped you with this, you know? Well,
that's exactly what I'm trying to do with House of Mages. Cause like people stepping into this, there's like all these different directions and like everyone's yelling that theirs is the only direction and the only path.
Right.
It's like, it's so hard. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. Like, and introduce people to critical thinking. Like one of the, like the fundamentals of House of Mages is going to be like, all right, before you potentially join a cult, maybe you should look at these criteria for a good cult. You know what I mean? Like what makes a good cult? Like what is the right cult for you? Yeah.
How much Kool-Aid do you want to drink? How long are you going to drink that Kool-Aid for, do you think? You know, like, I fully
What's the average
agree.
price of Kool-Aid?
Things, totally. How much can one set of liver and kidneys digest before they start getting a little bit sick, you know? I think bigger picture and developmental maps and that kind of stuff is real helpful. Like I would recommend, and it's not the easiest reading in the world, but reading things like Spiral Dynamics or Ken Wilber, Integral Theory, that kind of stuff is great because it's not a spiritual system. It's more a map of how people grow, you know? So it's kind of like...
Have you ever read this, The Master Game?
I've not.
Yeah, it's a similar kind of idea. It's really, really good. Highly recommend anyone listening.
Yeah. Getting some kind of map of the territory is helpful, I think. And I think that's a good starting point of like, okay, what does this teach? What are the people that have done a bunch of this like? And they're a bunch of fucking weirdos, you know, like.
And I just want to, if you have time, quickly touch on your music for a second, because it's interesting as well that like, so I don't know what kind of hip hop you kind of grew up with, but I used to listen to like old school New York boom bap, like Mos Def, Talib Kweli, Pharoah Monch, like Busta Rhymes and stuff like that. And like Busta Rhymes' latest album, for example, is like super heavy. It's the end of days, submit to God now before it's too late. Like from someone who's now re-entering like the hip hop culture, and with like a pentagram on the side of your neck now, like, and obviously talking about things that would trigger like most hip hoppers. And the thing is as well, it's not just like average hip hoppers, it's probably the people that I look up to the most as like hip hop influences, culture and MCs like are quite heavy on these belief systems. So like,
right.
How are you feeling like coming into a culture that is quite heavily Christianized with a pentagram on the side of your neck? I'm really interested to like how, yeah.
It's funny. I mean, I haven't really thought about it in that way. I mean, I guess one, like hip hop to me is much like chaos magic is an energy in its fresh form is an energy of disruption. You know, it takes what it wants, and hip hop itself doesn't have beliefs. You know, it has culture. You know, but it doesn't have a dogma at the center of it. It is a postmodern construct. It has like cultural shades and maybe some archetypal, you know, form to it, but it's not like Christianity that says here are them. It doesn't have spiritual rules, right? And every different artist would have their own interpretation of that. And so for me, and also I'm not really seeing myself making a run at the hip hop scene. You know, I was in that scene for a long ass time. You know, I rap battled, I did shows, I did all that for like 12, 13 years, Australian hip hop scene, a little bit in the UK hip hop scene. And it was very formative and taught me a lot. But it's very narrow minded too. You know, it's very ironically traditional within its own subculture, you know? And so for me, I'm seeing myself much more targeting conscious community, arts festivals, conscious festivals, places where, you know, for one, I just did a show for Splendor in the Grass, right? I did a show for their online platform, which will come out, I think, in the later half of this year. And basically I did a 30-minute set, which was kind of a mixture of stand-up comedy and rap. And I did this whole construct where I just accidentally teleported into hell. And I'm doing a sort of 30-minute spot in a kind of club in hell. And I'm like, oh, there's a bunch of old ladies. How do you guys get here? Oh, you crashed your bus. Excellent. Oh, we've got some lesser demons here. How do you guys feel about being called lesser demons? You know, are you ready to like, is there a movement where you guys are going to fight for you know, like,
yeah.
And I'm kind of doing all this kind of crowd work with these invisible beings. And then I do a couple tracks one is about invoking dark and light and into matter. One is Goddess Delusion, which I think you might have heard, which is me ripping on dating spiritual chicks, and I kind of break it down and tell a story about each one and then do each one. One's called Potions, and it's about wizards steal drugs. That's how they make money, you know? And like, so there's this, I'm wanting to get myself in front of people who this subject matter will make some sense to, you know, and I'm also not married to that the music I make is going to be hip hop, because I definitely have that 90s New York boom bap influence in terms of like drum programming and stuff that I like. But musically within hip hop, I listen to a lot of like trap and kind of emo rap and shit. And I listen to heaps of like beautiful, moody music with fucking cellos. And, you know, I listen to a lot of stuff, but there's like 25 plus years of rap in me. So that's probably going to always have an impact. But also, like, I'm kind of a weirdo. So even when I was a rapper, I would make fucking weird shit. So I think what's coming through, the first album is shaping up, and it's probably going to be called Dark Wizard. Predictable, but really on, you know, and have this occult flavor. But I don't know if that's what I'm going to keep doing. I think even doing this has taught me, like, my production skills have developed, my appetite for different sounds has developed, you know, what I want to make. I've only done a few live shows with this new stuff, and I can feel that the live shows themselves are informing like what I want to bring.
Yeah, I'd really like to see that one that you did at Splendor. Is it like available online to watch?
It will be up on their platform, and then they're going to give me the raw, so I'll be able to package that up. And I shared a little reel on Instagram of the sound check that I did. And it's even that gives a vibe of what it looks like and how it feels. And I'm going to drip feed more of that stuff. And but I think like spoken word and comedy are going to be part of it, and also ritual, so I have ideas like, I want to do a gig and fucking rent a church and do like a remix of Crowley's Gnostic Mass, but I'll do the kind of, tantric Gnostic Mass or whatever, like, I got some kooky ideas that, trying to take them to the hip hop scene it's not going to be good for anyone,
Yeah.
And there are also amazing kind of conscious hip hop niches around, and people like, I don't know if you know Illuminati Congo. He's fucking rad. He's a Chicago dude who raps all this crazy non-jewel shit. He's like a breathwork guy, but he's a kind of full Rasta vibe meets
sweet
non-jewelist, and he's super kooky, big following, really cool. There's a lot of there, and there's quite a few witchy rap chicks out there, like New Yorkie. There's a kind of black witchy kind of scene. There's some interesting side. I mean, hip hop is so big now, right? And also conscious culture is so big that I feel like there's a million micro niches popping out. So I'm really in the early days of exploring who wants me, where will people love what I have to offer,
Yeah, sweet. I'm looking forward to it, bro. And that's what I really liked about your stuff that I've seen so far is like you're like happy to parody and like take the piss out of stuff. And I think a lot of the spiritual communities just don't do that. And yeah, and I feel as time goes on, like for this podcast, I've interviewed people who have been in like the magical scene or spiritual scene for like 50 years plus. And they're the first ones to be like, I actually have no idea what the fucking cosmos is. Like, they're like, oh, it's kind of like this. And they're like willing to joke around. But the people that have been in it a few years, they're 100% sure what life is and the cosmos is. And they're super serious about it. So, cool, brother. Well, yeah, thank you so much for chatting with me. Gone a little bit over time, but I appreciate it. And
very welcome.
Yeah, I guess to summarize, bro, if you've got like one, like, so all magicians, right? Like when they leave a word. So like Crowley's was Thelema, and like Michael Aquino from Temple of Set was remanifestation. If you could have like a word to leave people with, I know it's like a big thing to drop on you last minute, but if you could like summarize your entire existence, your entire philosophy into like one sentence or a couple of words, like would you have anything that comes to mind at the moment?
Yeah, it's about embracing all of it. That's the nutshell of what my grasp of what I'm about and all the things that have influenced me. It's about embracing all of it. It's like a dear friend of mine sent me a little gift of a bunch of magic gifts from when she moved from London, and then she put this little note with a pentagram and just this handwritten thing that just said, "This life wants all of you." And it's been sat on my altar ever since, and I'm like, I think that's my fucking message. It's like, sure, you're spiritual, but don't you also like, I don't know, want to eat like KFC in the bath? Like, like what you couldn't, and not that you have to, but I love people that could if they wanted to, that freedom. So it's about the integration of opposites, and it's about, embracing all of it. Yeah. Which is why do a ritual? Why not just write a goal on my whiteboard and go, cool, I'm going to achieve that. It's like, well, that typically engages my mind and my body maybe. But if I'm like, I do that and then I put that word into a sigil and then I draw it on the wall in the shower and then I'm like self-pleasuring, staring at that sigil and keep going until I barely even know what I'm doing anymore. And then I like, close it and let go and then go and watch TV. It's like, well, that just sent that intention through to like every part of me. So now my emotional body's on the case. My unconscious mind is on my energetic body's on the case. Like however you conceptualize what we are, we're so multidimensional. I want to harness all bodies, all parts, all components to move through this world with me. So it's like, I am an angel, a demon, a little boy, an old man, somebody, a big deal, nobody, no one special. All of that anchored into physical body, nervous system, human with a personality on the front. And it's like, and a broken heart and a fucking infinite connection to the oneness. And it's like, and a smart ass. And it's like, that's who I want to show up as. And that's why magic is the best, because it's all inclusive the way I approach it.
Yeah, I love that, bro. And I think it's so important, like the whole, even like from like left-hand path tantra, like finding what your like dogmas are and just like embrace it, just to make sure that it's not holding you, like, because we have these beliefs that end up like constricting us. So yeah, no, I completely understand. I love that, brother. So yeah, thanks for bringing more of that to the world, because I think it's really needed, really needed at the moment. So yeah, awesome, bro. Well, is there any last little pieces you want to? So Dane will have a profile on the House of Mages, so you can easily find all the stuff, any new updates of what he's doing. I'll link on there, and especially if you do end up releasing that course on the House of Mages, that'll all be available on there. But is there anything that you just want to drop quickly?
It's simple, man. Just follow me on Instagram. It's Dane.Tomas. And I'm on Spotify. I have the Dane Tomas podcast on Spotify with these kind of conversations going on. And I have some songs on Spotify, The Goddess Delusion, Fairy Tales, and a new one called Invocation about to drop. Be definitely out by the time this is out. So that's the easiest places to find me. And yeah, thanks for having me, bro. Good talk.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Well, I got through like half the questions I was going to ask, so maybe one day we can do another one.
Part 2. Yeah, excellent.
Sweet, brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you for being a part of another episode of Make Yoga Magic Again, the House of Mages podcast. I'm Daniel Cumming. A massive thank you to Dane Tomas for being my guest for this episode. For the links to what Dane does, as well as anything we've talked about today, you can head to thehouseofmages.com. The House of Mages is an online school of yoga, tantra, and the magical arts. We run yoga teacher training and have a membership platform that gives you access to an extensive curriculum in developing your magical abilities with some of the best teachers in the world on various esoteric arts. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next time. Make yoga magic.